Hello, little adventurers! Welcome back to Simple Stories, Smart Kids. Today, we have a story full of magic, mischief, and a little bit of apple drama. It's time for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Are you ready? Let's go! Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a princess named Snow White. She had skin as white as snow, lips as red as a rose, and hair as black as a raven's wing. Basically, she was a walking fairy tale cover model. But guess what? Someone in the kingdom was not happy about this. Enter the evil queen, dramatic, stylish, and obsessed with her magic mirror. The evil queen was a real piece of work. She was the kind of woman who would look in the mirror and say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" and expect a compliment every single time. One day, the mirror, probably tired of her incessant questioning, decided to throw a curveball. "Well, dear queen," it said, "your stepdaughter Snow White is now the fairest." The queen's face turned a shade darker than her favorite black velvet gown, and she knew she had to do something drastic to reclaim her title. Now, let's pause for a moment to appreciate the lengths to which the queen went. Instead of just giving Snow White a makeover or sending her to a spa day, which would have been far more civilized, she decided to hire a huntsman. Yes, a huntsman, because nothing says family bonding like sending someone to hunt down your stepdaughter. The queen instructed the huntsman to take Snow White deep into the woods and dispose of her. But as fate would have it, the huntsman had a heart, perhaps too much of one for a guy in his line of work. He couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he told Snow White to run far, far away and never look back. So, off she went, prancing through the forest like a deer on a sugar high. She stumbled upon a quaint little cottage that looked like it had been plucked straight from a Pinterest board. Curious and not at all concerned about the potential for danger, Snow White pushed the door open and stepped inside. What she saw was a scene that would make any cleanliness-obsessed person faint. The place was a disaster zone, with dishes piled high, clothes strewn about, and an aroma that could only be described as a mix of wet socks and something that might have once been a vegetable. But what caught her attention were the 7 little beds lined up in a row. 7 beds? This must be a party. Like a hike? She thought, and without a second thought, she flopped onto one of them and fell into a deep, dreamy slumber. Little did she know, those beds belonged to 7 dwarfs who had just finished a long day of diamond mining and were on their way home. As the dwarfs, grumpy, sleepy, dopey, bashful, happy, Doc, and Sneezy, entered their humble abode, they were greeted by the sight of a princess snoring like a chainsaw on Grumpy's bed. Now Grumpy, as you might guess, was not the most cheerful of fellows. He took one look at Snow White and exclaimed, "What in the name of all that's dwarfy is going on here?" The others, however, were enchanted. "She's beautiful," squeaked Bashful, who promptly turned as red as a tomato. After a brief debate, the dwarfs decided to let her stay. They figured having a princess around might add a touch of class to their otherwise chaotic lives. And so began the most peculiar living arrangement in the forest. Snow White quickly became the queen of their little kingdom, cooking, cleaning, and teaching the dwarfs how to properly use a broom, which, let's be honest, was a skill they sorely lacked. Days turned into weeks, and Snow White and the dwarfs created a routine that was as chaotic as it was charming. Dopey, the lovable but clueless one, often tried to help in the kitchen, but his idea of cooking usually resulted in a flour explosion that would leave the entire cottage looking like a snowstorm had hit. Sneezy, on the other hand, couldn't help but sneeze at the most inopportune moments, causing everyone to jump in surprise, and sometimes even spill their soup. And Grumpy? Well, he remained grumpy, but even he couldn't resist the infectious laughter that filled the cottage. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the evil queen was not pleased. She was still fuming about that pesky mirror and decided to take matters into her own hands. She concocted a plan that was as twisted as a pretzel. Disguised as an old peddler woman, she set off to find Snow White. With a basket full of poisonous apples, because, who doesn't have those lying around, she was determined to finish what she started. When she finally reached the dwarf's cottage, she knocked on the door and called out, "Apples? Fresh apples! Get your apples here! Snow White, being the curious girl she was, opened the door. The moment she laid eyes on the old woman, she felt a tingle of warning. But the peddler was crafty and offered Snow White the most beautiful apple she had ever seen. "Just one bite, dearie, and you'll be as beautiful as the dawn," she crooned. Snow White, in a moment of weakness, and perhaps a little too much trust in strangers, took a bite. Instantaneously, she collapsed, looking as lifeless as a sock left behind in the dryer. The evil queen cackled with glee, certain she had finally won. But as fate would have it, the dwarfs returned just in time to find their beloved Snow White in a deep sleep. They were devastated, and Grumpy for once looked genuinely sad. They placed her in a glass coffin, which seemed a bit excessive. But hey, they were dwarfs with a flair for the dramatic. Days turned into weeks, and the forest mourned their princess. But one day, a handsome prince happened upon the scene. He was riding through the woods, probably looking for a good Instagram photo, when he saw the beautiful Snow White lying there, looking like she had just come from a high-fashion photo shoot. Captivated, the prince leaned down and kissed her. And wouldn't you know it, the kiss broke the curse. Snow White awoke as if she had just taken the best nap of her life, and the dwarfs cheered like they had just won the lottery. The prince, smitten, asked Snow White to marry him, and she, still a bit dazed from her unexpected slumber, said yes. The evil queen, upon hearing the news, was furious. But by then, she had become a bit of a punchline in the forest. The dwarfs had taken to telling stories of her failures, and her reputation as the queen of bad decisions spread far and wide. As for Snow White and the prince, they lived happily ever after, with the dwarfs frequently visiting for dinner, and Dopey still managing to set off flower explosions now and then. And so, in a land where magic and mischief intertwined, Snow White found her happily ever after, not just with a prince, but with a band of dwarfs who had become her family, proving that sometimes the most unexpected friendships can lead to the greatest adventures. Snow White teaches us valuable lessons. Kindness and bravery make us truly beautiful, while jealousy leads to trouble. Never trust strangers or accept food from them. Good friends bring happiness and support, and hope helps us overcome challenges. True beauty comes from a kind heart, not just appearances. Stay positive, smart, and kind always. And that, my little friends, is the story of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Remember, never take apples from strangers. If you loved this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more magical tales, share with your friends. See you in the next adventure. Bye-bye.